All right, everyone. Now, for this portion of the Installfest, we're going to go ahead and actually concentrate inside of Mac OS. There's a little bit of prerequisites, so please make sure that your system settings and your software update is up to date. For time's sake, I'm not going to go ahead and do that step. I'm just going to move straight into our Installfest part. Now, there is an option for you to get iTerm to. I personally just like utilizing the default terminal that's already on here. If you use Command Spacebar, it's going to open up this search, and then you can just type in terminal. Oh, there you go. That opens up the regular iTerm terminal that already comes with Mac. And this one works just great. If you do like the iTerm 2 and you would like to open that up, you can. Let me go ahead and grab that link here. And let me send it here on our chat. All right, so you should see it populate on the chat. If I go ahead and open that up, you'll see here's all the iTerm information. You can download this, and then this will allow you to add a little bit of default settings. You can make it look pretty, add some colors. Not necessarily something that we need, so I'm not going to go ahead and cover this. There's also OMyZSH, which you can install. That is also inside of our Installfest document if you want to personalize your information a little bit more. But definitely not something that you'll need in order to get a working environment. So let's dive into the good stuff. Let's get a little bit of working environment going on here. That's cool. All right. So if I want to get a little bit of working environment, I'm going to go ahead and open up Google Chrome here. Now, inside of Google Chrome, I'm going to go and install VS Code. I'm just going to look up for Mac, download. Now, VS Code is going to be what we utilize to do any of our Visual Studio Code or any of our editing files. I'm going to go ahead and open up this download Visual Studio Code for Mac. I'm going to click on that. You'll see it's going into my download files. All right. So there's my, Jesus, so many notifications to happen all at once. So here's my VS Code being all opened up. Now Visual Studio Code is here in my downloads. This step is very important. Do not leave Visual Studio Code in your downloads. Instead, grab Visual Studio Code and drag it into your desktop. Or excuse me, into your applications. So Visual Studio Code into applications. Now that's going to actually move it into your operating system. So make sure you do that step. All right. Now that that's done, what I can do here is I can look for Visual Studio Code inside of my applications. That's going to open it up and give it the correct permissions. It's going to open. It's going to ask me for a couple of things. I don't really need to do this entire walkthrough. You could choose your theme. Move into the next section. We'll talk about extensions later on. All right, so here's VS Code. Nothing too crazy just yet. We'll go into how to connect everything here later on. The next thing that I'm going to open up is going to be the command palette. Now I do that by pressing Command, Shift, and P all at the same time. And that's going to open up the command palette inside of VS Code. Here, I'm going to type in code. Now when I type in code, it should give me Command Shift P. Oh, I apologize, it's not code. Oh, here it is. So shell command install code, command and path. So that's the one that we want. I'm going to go ahead and click on this command here. Code will now open an OAS script. Okay. It's going to ask me for my permissions. Okay, now it tells me that it was successful. Great. To make sure that it was successful, I'm going to change directory into my desktop. And here I'm going to make a directory named Installfest. From then, I'll change directory into Installfest. And I'm going to code this file. All right, so that worked. Yes, I trust. I now have Visual Studio Code opened up. Everything is nice and readable, and I'm inside of my Installfest directory right away. Now, if I want to open up a terminal here, I can either go up to the upper right-hand corner, and I can click on this panel, and that will open up a terminal. At the very top, you can also click on terminal and touch new terminal there. Or you could just do Command Shift caret, or excuse me, Control Shift caret, and that will go ahead and open up a terminal as well. So that's how you get your hands on this terminal. It's exactly the same thing that we have here that comes built in inside of your VS or inside of your machine. There's no difference between the terminal in VS Code and this terminal coming in from iTerm. Everything still works exactly the same. And then I can execute Linux commands. I can say, hey, I want to touch main.py and I want to touch main.js. And you'll see that those two files have now been created. All right, fantastic. So that's installing Visual Studio Code. Does anyone have any questions up to this point about installing Visual Studio Code and getting that code command installed to be able to open up files?
What was the command one more time for the top part for the code?
For the top part for the code, like opening up the command palette.
Yes.
So it's Command Shift P will open up your command palette. Then you could type in code. And what you're looking for is shell command install code. All right. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to install Homebrew. Now, Homebrew is just a package manager that will allow us to make sure that specific information gets installed into our machine effectively, and also to make sure that everything is working as far as having the latest version of everything. So I'm going to open up this link to Brew. You'll see Brew gets opened up here. Pretty straightforward. It gives me the command that will install Brew straight into my machine. So I'm going to copy that, go over to VS Code. I'm going to paste it. So now it's going to ask me for my permissions. So it's saying, hey, this has to be with sudo. So I need you to type in your permissions. You'll see that I'm typing, but nothing is showing up on my terminal saying that I am typing. This is called blind typing. It is perfectly normal. Your machine is actually still accepting your input. It's just not displaying it in the terminal. Okay, so I typed in my password wrong. So let me try that again. That time it worked. It's going to ask me to press enter again. All right, and now Homebrew is being installed into my machine. It might take a little bit of time to do so. If anyone needs me to slow down, please raise your hand so that I'm tracking. Otherwise, I'm going to keep going at full speed. So let me know if there's any stopping points that you need me to cover. All right, you'll see that it's downloading Xcode now. just to make sure it's moving. I'm going to go ahead and press enter. All right, that's looking good. So now I downloaded my command line tools for Xcode. Don't worry about Xcode. Xcode is just a different Mac installation version to be able to develop. We're not going to utilize it. We're going to stay inside of VS Code. It's going to finish soon, hopefully. All right. Looks like it's moving forward with that installation there. Perfect. So everything has been installed. It's important to pay attention to what this output is. Here you can see, hey, there are some next steps. So currently this homebrew is not on my path. So in order to place it into my path, it's telling me to execute a series of commands. The first one being echo into my ZSHRC or my Z profile. So I'm going to go ahead and take care of that. Paste it. All right, perfect. So that took care of one portion. Now next, I'm going to go ahead and echo an evaluation of a path into my Z profile. And then finally, it tells me, hey, I want you to evaluate if this exists. And that command was successful. So everything has been placed in. You can't, or at least I don't think you can run all three of them at the same time, and I don't recommend it. Let me go ahead and, actually, I'm not going to do that portion. If I wanted to see what's going on here, what I can do is, let me open up a separate terminal. Here you'll see that there is a Z profile located, and I can just take a look at it. I can say code.z profile. In that Z profile, there we have the eval of OPT homebrew being installed, which is one of those echo commands. All right. So now we have that eval OPT installed. There is going to be another file that we have to create here. But before we go into that, let's start worrying about brew. So now that I've installed brew, I'm going to go ahead and run brew doctor. Now, what brew doctor is going to do is going to make sure that brew is pretty much up to date and ready to go. I'm actually going to run brew update as well. So it looks like homebrew is already up to date. Let me make sure everything is good there by running brew doctor one more time. Okay, good. So my system's ready to brew. There was no dependencies and no issues. I'm ready to start installing information. Now, before I do that, I need to worry about something called my ZSHRC file. Now you'll notice that this terminal is a CSH terminal. What is ZSHRC is just a file that my ZSH terminal will utilize as a source of truth every time it is opened up. So again, I'm going to change directory into my users folder and run ls-a. Here I can see that I have a .z profile, but I don't have a .zshrc. So I'm going to make that. I'm going to say touch dot ZSHRC. And that creates my file. From there, I'm going to open it up. I'm going to go ahead and run ls. Won't show it. ls-a now shows my .zshrc file. I'm going to code .zshrc. Now I'm simply just going to write in a path for my ZSH to be able to figure out where all of my local input is coming from. Essentially, I want to make sure that my terminal knows where brew is located so that I can manage or use all of the information within brew. So I'm going to go ahead and write an export line. And what I'm going to say is I want to interpret a path. Notice how there's no space in between this equal sign and path. I'm going to say from whatever the current path is, I want you to go into the user local/bin. And this is the location where my ZSH terminal will be able to find brew to utilize Node and Python and all of the other things that we'll be installing today. Now I'm going to run Command S. That's going to save the file. And then finally, inside of my terminal, I'm going to run source.zshrc. That way it knows to find the correct file. I can even close down all my terminals and open up a new one. Oh, that will take care of it up to this point here. All right. Now we're going to go into installing Python. Before we do so, does anyone have any questions or has anyone had any trouble keeping up to this point?
I'm having an issue with the ZHR SHRC profile.
Okay, what would be the issue?
So when I installed Homebrew, it wasn't listed, but then when I searched for it, it was there. So then when I tried going into it, it just didn't have any text in it like yours did.
Got it. So if it didn't have any text in it, it's going to be because of that echo eval command from when you first installed brew. Um, so let
That
me,
command wasn't in that last little bit of terminal either in the line.
oh, if it didn't give it to you, then don't worry about it. It could just be a simple, you have a newer MacBook than I do that I'm currently working on, and they won't need that extra line. Awesome. So you're saying it didn't give you those next steps portion?
It did not. And then I typed in what you did with the .zshrc. What was the command that you used to run it?
You don't run it. You just
You
type
know.
it in and save it.
All right.
If you want to update your terminal to make sure that it's good, you'll use source and then tilde for the current location and then .zshrc. And we could even add something like, hey, I want you to echo um, ZSHRC red. That way we could see it. So source. Oh, that didn't work. So let me delete that. All right. So then we have our export path. Everything's good with ZSHRC. Let's go ahead and start installing. Currently, if I run which Python 3, you'll see that it's aiming at user/bin/Python. That's the Python 3 that already comes with your machine. It is not necessarily the newest version of Python 3. So let's go ahead and fix this. We're going to brew install Python. That's going to install the newest version of Python 3. All right. Everything's coming in slowly but surely. There we can see that it's downloading Python 3.13. All right, so Python is installed as OPT homebrew bin Python, ARD version symlinks. So there it tells me a couple of links that it has created to pip, Python 3 config, some other pip stuff, pip 3. Okay, great. So Python has been installed, and it tells me even the path where it has been located. So now, when I run which Python 3, I shouldn't just see user slash bin slash Python 3. I should see something different. So let's see what comes up. If I run which Python 3, I see opt slash homebrew slash bin slash Python 3. Just like it told me, that's where it is now located. It is able to identify that we are using the homebrew Python 3 and not the Python 3 that comes in from my machine. All right. Now I want to make sure that we have pip available inside of Python. So I'm just going to go ahead and run Python 3-m. This is saying, hey, there's this function inside of Python that I want to execute, and it's going to be called ensure pip. When I run this, it should tell me, hey, default to user. All right, looking requires are already satisfied. So it tells me pip has been installed and is ready to download any different uh, pip dependencies that I need. And I see a hand from Andy. What's up?
When you did the which Python 3, there's nothing changed. It's still under user. I think I followed every step. Is there an issue or is something that we don't have to worry about?
Yes. Did you make sure that this is inside of your ZSHRC file?
Yes, it is.
Okay. So if that's inside of your ZSHRC file, go ahead and run source, then the path to this file. So there you can see the path to my file is at the user folder. And make sure that that ZSHRC file actually lives at the user directory as well.
Can I do which ZSHRC to verify where it is?
You can, yes. Oh, actually, no, you can't. Let me see. If you run cd tilde and then run ls-a, you should see ZSHRC there.
Yeah, it's there. I guess I'll try again source. So that
You run source.zshrc and then run which Python 3.
yeah, it's still user. It's probably user error. I'm not sure what I'm doing wrong there.
Okay, then let's we're gonna go ahead and put that to the side. Once I finish walking everybody else through Installfest, you and myself can go back and look through this Python 3 issue. All right. So we still have brew. Everything's good. Let me go ahead and pip 3 was ensure pip. If I run pip 3 now, with the exception of anybody who had problems with Python being installed, if I run pip 3 now, it's going to give me a series of commands that I can use, but this is just telling me that it's successful and I actually have it inside of my machine. So this is perfect. Now, I want to create a virtual environment that I can utilize inside of my machine. So here in this tilde folder, I'm going to go ahead and run Python -m venv. I'm going to name it .default. I apologize. It's going to be Python 3-m venv.default. All right. Now, if I run ls-a, you'll see that there is a default directory there. This is going to make a virtual environment for me where I can make Python dependencies and install different Python without interacting with the rest of my machine. So now to make sure that this gets activated, I can run source dot default slash bin slash activate. And you'll see that on the left-hand side, I now have in parentheses a dot default. This is telling me that my Python virtual environment has been created successfully. All right, awesome. Now we're going to go ahead and start diving into Node. For Node, we're going to start by installing with brew install npm, which stands for Node Package Manager. This is what's going to actually let me interpret JavaScript code. Okay, great. So now Node has been installed. Now, just because I have Node doesn't mean that it's installed globally or that it is stable. So let me go ahead and make sure that it's global. So I'm going to install globally this N package. That's going to enter my entire Node package manager. Because I use sudo, it's going to ask me for my password. I type in my password and the download starts. So it added one package. Perfect. Okay, here it tells me to update. So there's a new minor version available. Nothing that I really need to make a big fuss about. This is perfectly fine, the one I have. Now I'm going to go ahead and stabilize Node to make sure that it works properly. I'm going to run sudo and stable. And it's going to stabilize Node so it can actually interpret JavaScript code correctly. So now if I just type in Node on my terminal, I can actually write JavaScript. I can do console.log, hello world, and you'll see that hello world is returned in my terminal as an output. Finally, I can just exit with .exit and get my terminal back. All right, does anyone have any questions over Node? Okay, no questions over Node. Let's go ahead and keep moving forward here. If Node is established, now we're going to install Git. And we'll go into the difference between Git and GitHub tomorrow. We won't be talking about that too much today. So I'm going to go ahead and brew install Git. It's going to install Git for me. And then I'm going to change some global configurations here. So I'm going to say git config. Inside of Git, there's a configuration file that I want to say, hey, globally, inside of this configuration file, there is a dictionary that stands for global, or a file that is named global. Inside of this file, there is a user object with the key of name and email. Well, I want to set the key of name to my name, and this is going to be the name that you have on GitHub. In my case, that's Fravala08. So get config -- global user.name Fravala08. Then I can say get config -- global user.email, and then specify the email that that's tied to. All right. Now to make sure that that works, oh, excuse me, there's one more configuration that we need to change here. It's going to be git config -- global core which is just a separate object inside of this file. Editor. And we're going to change that to code dash dash wait. This is just telling it, hey, all of my code is going to be happening inside of VS Code. Everything is going to be aligned to the username of Favela08 with the email of FR4V1L4. This is going to make it easy for me to connect my GitHub to my Git locally. All right. And now to just make sure that everything happened correctly, I'm going to run git config dash dash global dash L. And that gives me user.name, email, and core.editor. All right, I'm going to take a pause there. Does anyone have any questions regarding this Git file? Or has anybody ran into any issues?
When I ran that last command, it shows up there. There's two core editors, both equal to code.
They're both showing equal to code?
Yes.
That's okay. As long as you have that line at least once, we're good. It's okay if it's multiple times. All right. Any other questions? Perfect. Now let's go ahead and link our GitHub. So now I'm going to go ahead and brew install GH. Now GH is a separate command line tool that will allow me to interact with GitHub directly. And it will allow me to actually authenticate myself so I can push and pull from GitHub without having to worry about tokens or anything else. So now I'm just going to GH auth login. It's going to ask me, hey, how do you want to do this? I want to do this through github.com, and I want to do it through Hypertext Transfer Protocol Secure. All right, now it's going to ask me, do you want to use your Git credentials? Well, the Git credentials is what we just set, that GitHub name and that GitHub email. Now, because I set them correctly, I'm going to put Y, which is saying, yes, I want to utilize those credentials. It's going to ask me, how would you like to identify for the GitHub CLI? Would you like to utilize the web browser or paste in a token? Well, I didn't generate a token, so I'm just going to go to the browser. It tells me, hey, first copy this code. Okay, so I'm going to make sure that gets copied onto my clipboard. Good, I copied it. And then it tells me, go ahead and open up this link in your device. Okay, so it opens it up. It's going to ask me to sign in there. All right. Let me make sure that I get into GitHub here. It's having me do a mobile authentication. All right, that went through. Now it's asking me to paste that code. This is the code that was provided to me in my terminal. All right, so there's that code. I continue. It's going to ask for access. I authorize GitHub and tells me, congratulations, you're all set. Well, now if I go back, when I press enter, oh, that's already done. Continue, Command V, continue. Okay, that's all. It's all good there. All right, so there you go. And now I get a bunch of check marks. So authentication complete, configured get protocol, and I'm logged in as Favela08. Just make sure you have all these check marks for your authentication. Did anybody run into any troubles there? All right, if no one ran into any troubles, then let's go ahead and put it into some practical application. We're just going to go ahead and clone a repo that's public inside of GitHub. We're going to go ahead and do gh repo clone. And I just want to get Lodash / Lodash. So this is an organization named Lodash with a repository named Lodash. So here it is. It's cloning that Lodash repository straight from GitHub. If I run ls, I see that I have Lodash in there. Great, so that works successfully. If I change directory into Lodash and run ls-a, I'll see a bunch of files and directories that I never created. This is all coming straight from GitHub. I was able to copy it down. So that worked fantastic. I'm going to change directory one back. I'm not going to need this. So I'm just going to go ahead and remove Lodash by running rm-rf Lodash. That will remove Lodash from my machine because I'm never going to actually use it. I just wanted to make sure that my GH was working correctly. All right. Anybody run into any troubles cloning or removing set repository from your machine? Perfect. If there weren't any troubles, let's go ahead and keep moving forward here by going into our aliases. So in our ZSHRC file, we're going to go ahead and create a couple of aliases. Now, an alias is just basically setting a variable for specific commands. For example, I can say Python 3 will now just be referenced to as Python. And pip3 will now be referenced to as pip3. Or excuse me, pip will now be referenced to as pip3. Again, I'm going to save the file by running Command S or going up to File and clicking Save. Then to make sure my settings get updated, I'm going to source.zshrc. And now if I run Python, you'll see that it knocks me straight into a Python terminal where I can write Python code. I can say print, this is Python. And that gives me back, this is Python. And I can exit this terminal shell or this Python shell. If I run pip, you'll notice that it gives me all the information for pip. I just simply cut out the 3. All right. Any questions regarding aliases? Okay. Now to make sure every time that I open up a new file, this virtual environment gets activated, what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a command saying source from this directory or from my user's directory. I want it to go into default/bin/activate. I'm not sure why this echo command isn't working, but we shall see. Okay, I'm going to save it. I'm going to exit my terminal. I'm going to open up a new one. All right, so there we see hello world. This is telling me that I was able to read through my entire alias or my entire ZSHRC profile. And you can see that .default has already been activated, and I didn't have to type it in myself manually because it did this source.default/bin/activate. So all of my aliases are up to speed, and I got that hello world because it was able to read my entire .zshrc profile. Any questions up to this point? Okay, it doesn't seem like there are any questions, so let's go ahead and finish this off. We have one more installment to make, which is going to be PostgreSQL. and we're going to install version 14 specifically. We're going to say brew install PostgreSQL at 1.4. So that starts downloading Postgres there. All right, so it tells me where it was able to create Postgres, the encoding that it's using it, and then it tells me, hey, if you want to see if Postgres is running, run brew services. All right, or if you don't want, okay, well, it's running as a background service, and we definitely want it to keep running as a background service, so we'll leave it just as such. So if I run brew services, you'll see that it tells me, hey, there's PostgreSQL 14, and the current status of it is none. It's not off, it's not on. Well, I want it to start, or I want it to be on. So I'm just going to run brew services, restart PostgreSQL at 14. And it tells me, hey, it successfully started. Well, now let's go ahead and see the status of it. Well, now it tells me, hey, here is PostgreSQL. Instead of none, I'm getting that the status is now started. The user is Francisco Avila, and there's the current location of my data cluster. All right. Well, how do I know it's working now? I'm actually going to enter PostgreSQL. I'm going to run PSQL Postgres. And once I see this ampersand saying Postgres, that's how I know that I'm inside of PostgreSQL. Let's take it a step further. Let's actually make it to where we have our own database and file. Let me see. Let me look up this command here. Send it. Andy?
Yeah, I'm following along just fine. It's just I'm kind of lost as in what's the purpose behind a lot of the code that we're writing. Postgres, I don't know what that means. We're going into this thing and it's just if I was able if I had to redo this on a new device, I have no doubt that I would be able to I'll be lost essentially.
Got it. Yeah, absolutely. I get it. Let me go ahead and break everything down here shortly. I want everybody to have their stuff installed, and then afterwards we'll dive in deep into what everything that we did actually covered. I apologize for that feeling of being lost, but I'll go back through it here shortly. Creating user. All right. So just to clarify this answer, Postgres, what this is or what we installed, which is PostgreSQL, is going to actually be our database management system. That's what we're going to be utilizing as a database. And it's a relational database, meaning that everything kind of comes out looking very similar to almost like Excel sheets. Everything's going to be in tables. We're not going to dive into how the database works just yet. We have an entire week that's purposely created for that. And essentially, I'm gonna go \Q. This is gonna exit and send me back to my regular directory. Currently, right now, I'm living inside of my machine. And in my machine, I have just my users, right? I have my regular stuff. Well, inside of my machine, I essentially just installed a small program that is managing data. Now, this program lives outside of my regular operating system. It's running as a background service. So in order to enter this application that is managing my data, I have to utilize my PSQL command. So this PSQL is what actually enters inside of my database. But when I type in PSQL, it's going to tell me, hey, there's no inside of port 5432, which we'll talk about ports later on. There's database running. We know that my database is running because we saw that this set started. but it's telling me there's no database named Francisco Avila. Well, when I type in PSQL alone, it assumes a lot of information. So it assumes that it's entering to a database that is inside of my local machine. And it assumes that the database it's entering would match my username. Currently, that doesn't exist. But when you install PostgreSQL, a database and user named Postgres already exists by default. So when I type in PSQL Postgres, it's logging into that database system and sending me straight into the Postgres database. All right. There's multiple databases that I can have inside of this management system. And we're going to go into creating new ones here shortly. So now that I'm inside of Postgres, I want to create a new user and create a new database. So I'm going to go ahead and actually, let me see, PSQL Postgres. Yeah, we're going to go ahead and create a role, which is going to be for myself. So I'm going to do create role, my username named Francisco Avila. And I'm going to say, hey, I want this to be with the following permissions. I want it to have login permissions. I want it to have super user permissions. And I want it to have create database permissions. And then finally, I also want it to have create role permissions. So this command is going to create a user named Francisco Avila inside of this database management system. All right, and then it tells me, hey, the role Francisco Avila already exists. Perfect. So that means that this command up here that tells me that there was an error, it's not because my role doesn't exist. I exist within this database management system. The database Francisco Avila doesn't exist. So that's an easy fix. I can do create database Francisco Avila. This semicolon is going to end my command. When I press return, it says create database. So that means that my database was created. Again, \Q is going to allow me to exit this database management system and go back into my regular operating system. So now I'm back in my regular operating system. You can see that my command line has changed. Well, now instead of typing PSQL Postgres, I can type in PSQL. It's going to assume that inside of my local machine, there is a database management system running on a port 5432 with a database named Francisco Avila. And now when I run this command, you'll see that it logs in and it takes me straight into my database management system for Francisco Avila. Any questions regarding Postgres, or did anyone run into any issues installing Postgres?
When I did this, it says that same thing. It said like error role already exists, and then when I tried reopening it, just using PSQL, it still throws that port 5432 error.
Is it this one?
Yes.
Okay, so it's exactly the same error, just with a different username.
Uh, Same username.
Okay, with your username, right?
Correct.
Okay, perfect. So do PSQL space Postgres, just like we did here.
Mm-hmm.
And that should enter into Postgres like this.
Yes.
All right, now run create database and then type in your username with a semicolon. Once you press return, it should give you a success message that looks like this.
All right, it does.
Okay, now run that \Q, and that should give you your command line back.
Mhm.
And now just run PSQL.
All right, now it's working. Thank you.
Perfect. No problem. All right. Anyone else? Andy, the way that we walk through installing PostgreSQL, is that more what we're looking for the remainder of the install fest?
Yeah, I followed along with the rest of it.
Okay, perfect. All right. So now that Postgres has been installed, that's going to be the final step there. The only thing that we do have left is going to be extensions. So now extensions that I recommend. Let me go ahead and look through the extensions that I have here. All right, so there's going to be extensions for, let me see, there's the Python extension, which I believe is called, all right, so there's going to be this, it's called pep/8. I very much recommend this extension. Um, then also there is Prettier. This extension here is also a good one. That's going to be for your JavaScript code. Just got to make sure that everything falls well. Let me see. You can also just go into Python. That gives you a nice Python extension there. You could get the Python debugger. I'm not a big fan of that one. I just utilize the Python one. All right, so those are all recommendations. They're not needed, but they're recommendations. They're just going to help you as far as like making sure that your code follows a standard and that it looks pretty and consistent. But things that are necessary will be live share. So live share will allow you to actively share your VS Code with someone else. You'll send them a link. That link will open up VS Code on the browser, and they'll be able to work alongside you whenever you guys are working through different coding assignments. All right, so that's one that it's a must. We need to make sure that gets installed. And then we have live server. For live server, we want this one, not the 5-star one. This live server will be installed, and we're going to utilize that to be able to host our HTML, JavaScript, and CSS inside of your default browser. The reason why we're utilizing this instead of just clicking and dragging files into a browser is because this server will actually identify when there is a change or there is a file that has been saved or updated, and it will automatically do a hot reload to reflect those changes inside of the browser. So you don't have to consistently refresh every time you're doing it. All right, so this is another must. Live server and live share. All right. Now, let's start walking down a couple of commands that we did here. Um, so I'm going to go ahead and pause the recording for this portion. And then I'll start sharing a different screen. All right, everyone. So now let's go ahead and start talking about what we just did and why we just did it. So we have our current machine. And inside of our current machine, there's a couple of things that I want to be able to execute. One, I want to make sure that I can execute Python. So let me go grab my sticky here. I want to make sure that I can execute Python. I want to also make sure that I can execute JavaScript code and that I have, I want to make sure I have my Git and GitHub connected. And then finally that I have a working database management system running in the background. All right, so here's our checklist of the things that we want to achieve. So I'll put that there. All right. So how do we go about doing any of this? Well, one, I need to be able to have something that can actually manage those dependencies. Now, in order to manage these dependencies, I don't necessarily just want to pour them straight into my machine without having something that can manage this installations and make sure that I have the newest version of everything. So that's where Brew comes in. We install Brew into our machine, and Brew doesn't necessarily interact with everything. It just kind of exists within the operating system without sticking its nose or changing too many things whenever I'm working within my machine, right? So Brew becomes in charge of managing version control for installations. Right, so that's where that Brew Doctor comes in. So steps such as Brew Doctor ensure newest versions are installed, and Brew Update ensures the newest version of Brew itself is present. Let me actually make this a little bigger because we are going to do quite a bit of writing here. All right, so that's the first step. We install Brew to be able to get this checklist down, right? And Brew just makes sure that we have the latest version of everything and that everything is being managed properly. Well, and we're not going to talk about the VS Code portion because that we know that that's going to be our editor. So that's the whole reason why we installed VS Code. All right, so now that I have Brew installed, its newest version is good to go. There's this .cshrc file, which is a little bit separate than Brew. So Brew exists in there, but inside of my machine, I have my terminal, which typically runs inside of ZSH. Now, this ZSH terminal, every time it's opened up, it automatically looks into my machine to find a .zshrc file, which holds default settings to preload to the terminal. Now, because of that, we were able to actually install a path. I wanted my path when commands are being executed to happen at the homebrew level. Not just at Mac, I wanted it to make sure that it checks homebrew to match everything. Well, I did that when I created this export path portion. That's what says, hey, every time we want to actually execute anything, I don't want you to just execute it from user/localbin. I want you to go into the correct path inside of user/localbin and find homebrew. And that's what allows it to actually utilize the versions of Python, Node, Git, and everything else that are inside of homebrew. And we did that by adding it into that CSHRC file. All right. Then we went and installed Python. Well, we know we're going to utilize Python to write regular code. Again, Python exists. It doesn't necessarily occupy some sort of like block of space. But when we install it, we get Python 3 inside of our environment. And when we get Python 3, well, we also want to make sure. Huh, interesting. So we get Python 3 inside of our environment. And we want to make sure that when we install Python 3, that it comes in with pip, which pip is another version control manager or Python dependencies. This is actually known as pip3. And we make sure that this exists, dependencies, there you go. We make sure that this exists by running the command python 3-m ensure pip. That's what allowed us to make sure that pip3 exists so that we can actually install different dependencies with pip. Now, whenever we're creating different Python projects, we want to make sure that each project has its own list of dependencies. So that's where virtual environments come in. And that's why we created a virtual environment. So virtual environments, which is VENV, are created to isolate project. Let me specify Python project dependencies. This is going to make more sense once we actually start working within Python. We do this, or we create a Python virtual environment with python-m venv.default. That's what made that Python virtual environment. All right. Now, when we created that Python virtual environment, it was working, but we also wanted it to be activated. So in order to activate this environment, we have to run the command source, specify where this .default directory exists, /bin, which is just another directory, and then a script named activate, which we also added to our ZSH file. We said, hey, not only do I want you to find homebrew, I also want you to load this directory every time. So we added this to our ZSH profile to ensure every time we open the terminal, it activates our virtual environment. All right. Any questions up to this point over what we've done? All right, perfect. Next, we went into Node. Node itself is utilized to manage JavaScript or Node dependencies. Unfortunately, when it comes in, it is unstable off the box. And because of that, we have to install N, which is a separate package meant to stabilize node. And then we run sudo npm stable, or excuse me, it was something like sudo npm dash dash global and stable. And that's what made sure that the node package manager became stable. Once the node package manager became stable, well, that's what allowed us to execute JavaScript code. All right. Finally, we went into installing PostgreSQL. We'll cover this Git and GitHub portion tomorrow, more in detail. So I'm not going to dive into that here. When we went into the portion of actually installing our database, what we installed was a database, a relational database management system, RDBMS. There you go. And the one that we installed was PostgreSQL. Again, it runs separately from our machine. It still lives inside of Brew, and that's the reason why we could find it inside of Brew services, but it lives separate from our machine. Now, when we install this, we install as a background service with a default user or default users of Postgres and the current user. Now, once that is installed, we need to restart it to make sure that the service is actually running because it's a background service. So we run sudo services PostgreSQL, or I think it's sudo services restart PostgreSQL. And this is what starts the RDBMS service. All right, let me go ahead and stretch this a little bit here. Now, in order to enter the RDBMS, we utilize PSQL, which is installed at the same time we install PostgreSQL. They come in as a package deal. And that's when we entered PSQL Postgres. Now, both of the users of Postgres and username exist inside of PostgreSQL, but there's not a there's not a database for my current user. So I needed to create a database for current user, which was our create database user quote. And that's what allowed me to enter PostgreSQL with the command PSQL. Now, when I enter the command PSQL, what's actually happening under the hood is it's saying PSQL at host, localhost, at port 5432, which PostgreSQL lives at port 5432, with the user, or excuse me, at the database of Francisco, or excuse me, user with the user of the current user. All right, so just by typing in PSQL, these are all of the assumed values. It enters a host, local host at port 5432 with the current database of the user as the user of user. And that's everything that we accomplished today when it came to installing our database system. All right. Does anyone have any questions about Installfest or why we did what we did? And then let me actually switch these two around here. All right. Additionally, we also had aliases inside of a SHRC file, which are variables to utilize as shorthands, or let's just call them shortcuts, to execute commands. For example, we had Python 3. We didn't want to have to type the 3, so we made an alias named Python. So now when I type in Python, what's actually getting executed is Python 3. And same thing for pip. All right. That is the entire Installfest breakdown there. Does anyone have any questions over anything that we covered during Installfest?
Yeah, just a quick question. I didn't raise my hand. For the is this like SQL related? Is that what it is? PostgreSQL?
Yes, that's
So
going to,
it's like a what is this back end coding preparation for that environment? Is that what it's about?
it is correct.
Oh, okay. All right, thank you.
Of course. Yeah, we want to see what this is going to be used to run. So this will be utilized to run our Django server. Node will be utilized to run our React applications. And then this PostgreSQL will be utilized to run SQL as our database. All right. Any other questions? Let's hear it, Andy.
Yeah, so like the whole process that we went through, we just made it easier to access these different things by renaming them, or were these things already installed on the systems?
They were not. So you had a version of Python. The version of Python that you have is whichever one was currently made when your MacBook was made, but they're usually outdated, right? So instead, we want to make sure that we always have the newest version. So in order to ensure that happens, we install it through Brew. So that Brew is in charge of making sure that the version of Python that we have on our machine is always the newest one, right? So then that way, when we install Python, I think the original one that I had in that MacBook that I shared was Python 3.9. and the newest version is already at 3.12. So I'm 3 versions behind. All right. So then when I installed it through Brew, I got the newest version of Python so I can actually write code and stay updated with everything that's coming out inside of Python.
Okay, so Brew kind of holds all the latest versions for these things, and that's why we're accessing Brew.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
Brew is in charge of making sure that everything that we're installing is to the newest version and making sure that all of that stays clean and has all the dependencies that it needs to work properly inside of our machine. All right. Any other questions? Okay, perfect. It doesn't look like there are any other questions from now until the end of day, so until 5 o'clock. What we ask is that you guys ensure that you have a proper working environment. If you need any help making sure that your environment is good to go, please let us know. Or if you're running into any hiccups, send us a message on Slack so that we can get to you as soon as possible. Again, reach out to the TAs and then or reach out to myself if you feel like I'm necessary. I will be sharing all of this inside of GitHub, and then everybody should be getting permissions to GitHub here shortly. So we should all be good to go in a couple of seconds. All right. If no one has any questions for me, then that's going to be it until 5 o'clock, at which point we'll reconvene back in the main Zoom room. Thank you so much, everyone. And I'll see everyone back at 5.